Colorado's hospitals are sighing with relief. They have vaccines. Patient numbers are dropping. They're feeling confident about staffing. We're trying to get a handle on how many Coloradans 70 plus want the vaccine and can't get it, with more people eligible to cram into those appointments. The pandemic through the eyes and emotions of young ones, and remembering one of Denver's great elders. That's next. Let's start with a sign that some of the first COVID-19 vaccinations are having a positive impact in Colorado. You can see it in the hospital staffing stats. Fewer hospitals nowadays are concerned that they could run out of healthy staff. More hospital employees are getting vaccinated, patient numbers are dropping, the load on the system is easing. Our Mark Salinger has the good news.
Imagine walking into a hospital and there not being enough people there to treat you. That threat is still real, but it's getting a lot better.
Our healthcare workers are working really long hours.
As of today, only 10% of facilities anticipate staffing shortages in the next week. That's about 8 to 10 hospitals around the state. If you look back just a couple of months to November, more than a third of all facilities in Colorado anticipated staffing shortages.
At one point, we had a couple of hundred staff out at a time, either because they were being quarantined or tested. Today we have 2.
Dr. J.P. Vallon is the chief clinical officer for SCL Health. He says most of his staff who got sick with COVID-19 caught the virus while away from the hospital. Now, fully vaccinated healthcare workers who are exposed to the virus can still work.
They can now just simply monitor for symptoms. They do not have to quarantine and stay away from work.
The State Department of Health says about 90% of all healthcare workers in Colorado are now fully vaccinated. As the positivity rate in the state continues to decline, the number of patients in hospitals also goes down.
Every hospital was experiencing their own unique challenges when it came to staffing. And without staff, you really can't care for patients coming into our hospital.
Amber Burkhart is with the Colorado Hospital Association. As of today, there are 411 hospitalized COVID patients in Colorado. Compare that to the peak in the beginning of December, when the number was more than 4 times that amount.
That number of additional patients absolutely put a strain on us and put a stress on us, and we were worried about from a staffing piece.
And hospitals dealt with these staffing shortages by flying in doctors and nurses from all around the country to come help here. Of course, in this most recent surge, hospitals everywhere were in need of staff. Kyle?
So, Mark, vaccines are a part of this, but I'm sure, like everything else, it's pretty complex.
Yeah, community spread of the virus is also a big deal. Obviously, if there's less virus spreading amongst people in the community, less people are going to get sick, and then less people are going to have to come into the hospital. And that's part of the good news that we're seeing right now.
All right. Also, great news to see the interior of the palatial Salinger estate. Typically, we're seeing the exterior view. Is that a live fish and an orchid behind you, Mark?
That would be correct. It's a little bit cold outside. I don't think the fish could have done very well on the porch right now.
Nor the orchid. Yeah. Wow. It's just
nor the orchid.
A little insight into your lifestyle. It's fascinating. All right. Thank you, Mark. Hey, we're getting closer and closer to what's going to be a really encouraging milestone when we can finally say that Colorado has fewer than 400 patients in our hospitals with COVID-19, down to 411 hospitalizations, which is a drop from 17 from the day before. We were 474 patients this time last week. Take a look at that ski slope down. We have not seen hospitalization levels this low since the end of October. Grand County Public Health has taken a different approach to a recent spike in COVID cases at Winter Park and Fraser. Instead of moving the entire county to level red restrictions as a result of the surge, they got the okay from the state to be more selective. So they walked in and basically shut down 3 places that they thought were the source of the spread. The county is not naming those 3 businesses, but Fisher's Bar in Fraser announced that it's one of the places where indoor dining is now banned. They posted on Facebook saying they're still doing takeout services. The bar's post says that public health workers told them that they were in compliance. It wasn't something they had done wrong, but their place is somewhere where people with COVID have been gathering. Hence the county getting involved to shut them down. The bar and those 2 other businesses agreed to the tighter restrictions, so they'll be able to avoid closing entirely. Grant County Public Health says this is a 2-week trial to see if targeting those 3 places can reduce the spike in cases. The county has also reached out to some community partners, seeing if they can get financial support for those businesses impacted. Winter Park ski area is still open. County says that its health workers do not think that the virus is spreading at inordinate levels outdoors there. They think the issue is when ski area employees are getting together for drinks after work. Just under 12% of our state's population has now received the first dose of the vaccine. That is the green section and the light blue section of the pie put together. Of those, 5.3% of the population now fully vaccinated. Though, of course, it means that the majority of us are still floating around in the unvaccinated blue yonder. The state now has less than 2 weeks to hit its goal of vaccinating 70% of people over the age of 70. Last week, they told us they were about 3/4 of the way there. State did not want to hit a lull in the pace of vaccinations, so that's why they chose to open it up to teachers and people 65 and older, while there were still so many unvaccinated older Coloradans. We continue to hear from people who are 70 plus, who are at higher risk, who cannot get a vaccine appointment with all the increased competition. Our Steve Steger is trying to find out how many of them are in line.
Wife and I are both 85.
By all accounts, Rich Aylesworth shouldn't have any trouble getting a vaccine right now. But he is.
We signed up at Kaiser, Centura Health, and UC Health. And we haven't gotten anything back from any of them, really.
We can't figure out how to get them, at the top of the list.
Tamara Monroe's been trying to find a shot for her 83-year-old parents.
Every time it's, you're on the list, we'll contact you, but they never get contacted.
Karen Pellegrin on the same hunt for her 78-year-old dad.
They finally called him the other day to confirm that he's on the list. That's it.
When the state opened the vaccine pool to 65 plus and teachers, they told providers they should still prioritize those 70 and up who are most at risk. So we asked major providers in the metro area today how many people 70 and older are still in line. We got a number from only 2 providers. SCL Health says 5,800 people 70 and older are still on their list. They're calling all of them to see if they need a vaccine or if they've gotten it elsewhere. Kaiser Permanente says there are 40,000 people 70 and older on their waiting list. UC Health, Denver Health, National Jewish, and Centura all told us that they couldn't provide us an accurate number since the list is constantly fluctuating and people might be signed up on multiple lists. That seemed to be the major source of uncertainty today, that people can sign up for a bunch of lists and there's really no concrete standard to cross their names off when they get the vaccine somewhere else.
We have you in the database for driver's licenses and IDs, but we can't get you set up for a shot.
Uncertainty.
Every time they open up the group, more people get into the pool.
Causing a heck of a lot of frustration.
Just wait, that's all there is to it.
So just calling around on this today, you get a real sense of the confusion that this can cause for people with just slightly different processes in different places. One of the things that we did find that was very interesting was Kaiser Permanente's system. They are pretty sure that everyone on that wait list still needs vaccine because they're able to purge their wait list. What they do is they take the state's vaccination database and they cross-reference it with their waiting list, so they can see when people on their list got a shot somewhere else and then remove them from the waiting list, Kyle.
Sounds like a laborious process, but that's good because it avoids appointments where nobody shows up. One key indicator of how cold it is how high Steve's sweater is zipped tonight. That thing is at the max. Steve, thank you. Our positivity rate yesterday jumped up just a touch. 5.4% of tests came back positive on Sunday. Our weekly average for positivity is still in really good territory. It's at 3.7%. So we heard from some next viewers on the Western Slope that they wanted to get in on your word of thanks generosity. And man, you delivered last week. More than $50,000 raised for small nonprofits in Mesa, Delta, Montrose, and Garfield counties. All those nonprofits specifically do work preventing youth suicide. Real concern on the Western Slope. So thanks to everybody who chipped in for the microgiving campaign, and especially the Western Colorado Community Foundation, another nonprofit which built that custom fund for all of us. They also chipped in $5,000 to get it started, and they're divvying up the money without any fees. All right, where are we taking the train next, folks? You have done $2.9 million worth of good for small to mid-sized nonprofits in Colorado. Will your astonishing generosity hit $3 million this week? It could happen. I'll be back on Wednesday with a fresh idea. Younger Coloradans working through pandemic emotions in a healthy way. You know, it's the one time you actually feel good that you feel like crud. People have been feeling punky after their second vaccine dose. So, should you be concerned if you don't feel bad? We'll take your question to an expert next. Tonight's next question comes to us from Loanne in Estes Park. Loanne, what a great name. She's heard 9 health expert Dr. Pyle Coley talk about people having reactions to the second dose of the COVID vaccine, and Loanne was wondering, what does it mean if you don't have a reaction? Should you be concerned you're not fully immune?
It's not a no pain, no gain type of phenomena with the vaccine. So even if you don't have those systemic symptoms the second time around, it doesn't necessarily mean that your immune system wasn't activated and that you didn't mount an antibody response, because in fact, there were many people in the clinical trials who did not have those symptoms the second time around. We also know that the occurrence of symptoms, whether it's local symptoms at the site of injection or these systemic symptoms, is dependent on 3 different factors. The first is host factors, the second is vaccine factors, and the third is administration factors, so how the vaccine was given to you.
Dr. Coley says that age and gender also could influence your reaction to the shot. Women tend to have more of a reaction than men do. It can also be a mental thing, depending on how you feel going into it. And if you've had bad reactions to shots in the past, that can also affect how your body responds to the vaccine. If you're curious about the efficacy after you get it, you could always wait 2 weeks and then go get an antibody test.
On our way to another very cold night tonight, but not as cold as last night at -16. Today, our high at DIA 19, but it was a whole lot colder across the Midwest and the northern plains. There's more cold air coming in, but much of it will be pushed eastward by building high pressure. Beyond that, another storm and another round of mountain snow and high avalanche danger. Denver could see a few snow showers this time tomorrow night. No snow tonight, just cold, partly cloudy and 7 above 0. Tomorrow, temperatures should get above freezing in the mid-30s. 30% chance of snow showers on Wednesday. Temperatures hovering around freezing both Wednesday and Thursday. Then a nice warming trend heading into the weekend, but we're also tracking another storm and chance for snow late Saturday.
Nettie Moore was the perfect kind of person that we hope to meet and introduce to you on Next. Somebody with real perspective, a unique outlook on life in Colorado. She welcomed all of us on Next into her home a couple years back. And Nettie Moore passed away last week at the age of 96. Nettie Moore had lived near Sloan's Lake in Denver since 1925, and she loved to talk about the changes that she had seen in nearly a century of life in Denver. This woman was so adored by her neighbors, they started just putting her name on stuff, from a low-income housing complex to a park in the neighborhood. Nettie Moore had 2 children, 8 grandchildren, 19 great-grandchildren, and 5 great-great-grandchildren. She told us she'd tell anybody who would listen. She always felt that Denver, her city, was God's country. They're experiencing the same issues as us grown-ups: sadness, frustration, loneliness.
It can be hard to address that with kids because they have so much trouble talking through their own emotions.
An author is helping kids and parents navigate isolation. Next. You know, I imagine that few people really are equipped to deal with the stress and isolation that we have experienced for almost an entire year now. And you have to think that's especially true for kids. There's a Coloradan, who also happens to be a mom, who is helping to show those young people it's okay to feel whatever they're feeling.
I live on Isolation Island. We can leave our island, but then we must stay in our bubble. Now the snow has come sighing back, and we are still on Isolation Island. So my name is Zoe Argento. I'm a Denver parent, and I wrote a book, Isolation Island, about a Denver kid dealing with a pandemic. The book is really intended to help children handle their emotions about the pandemic. They're experiencing the same emotions that the adults are experiencing in terms of sadness and frustration and loneliness with social distancing. And it can be hard to address that with kids because they have so much trouble talking through their own emotions and understanding them themselves. I don't like the space between. I want to be so close that I can whisper secrets in Emmy's ear. I think what parents have told me is that their children have a lot of questions. Why are they in bubbles? Why are people floating around in bubbles? And the children are like, oh, yeah. It's a way to suddenly make sense of, all these crazy rules for kids that you have to stay 6 feet away. So I think that it's been particularly a wonderful way for parents to connect with their children and find some words to talk about it in graphic terms. And my hope is that the book gives people a way to recognize that what they're feeling is understandable in this situation. And we'll get through this together. We are separate together, and we are not alone.
It's amazing what kids have the ability to process. My 2-year-old was telling me over the weekend, she's like, yeah, we're not going to go into the store because of the germs. They're tiny. You can't see them. I'm like, you're 2. She's basically a microbiologist at this point. Zoe shared her story through the lens of photojournalist Corky Scholl. Zoe told us she's donating all of the profits from her book, which you can get on Amazon, to Feeding America, America's largest hunger relief nonprofit. Well, the absolute last thing that you would ever find me doing in cold like this is the most Colorado thing we saw today. That and your feedback next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is an icy level of dedication to your hobby. Hang gliding in -1 degree weather in Golden yesterday. Chris spotted people taking off from Mount Zion. I cannot even wrap my mind around this, but I guess now you can say that you did it. I'm still not sure that I would. If you happen to do a double take at what you see our neighbors doing in this cold, please share it with the rest of the class. That's what Max did. You think you're safe from the cold at home, and then you open the door in your nice toasty house, and the rush of the hot air shatters your glass storm door. That's pretty wild. Max shared this from his house in Park Hill. I had to Google this, but apparently this is a thing that happens when the hot air hits the really cold glass. Your feedback tonight, you've got a lot to say. I want to dive into this. Donald Martin says, got my first shot Saturday, UC Health, Aurora. Hit the ball out of the park. Fabulous job, guys. Well done, organized, friendly. That's people's vaccine experiences. You're either on the end that Donald's on, or you're where Em is, writing in tonight to say that her grandmother is 93 and number 50,000 in line on the list that she's on. There's a problem there, Em. Send us a note next at 9news.com, and we're going to see if we can get that figured out for you. Shelby Williams had a note about Word of Thanks coming to the Western Slope, the 3 nonprofits that address the issue of youth suicide there. Shelby says, thanks for helping on this side of the state. Youth Zone, one of the 3 nonprofits that you all helped, saved her brother's life in high school. Linda Banks in Erie says, thank you for the good news, the hard news, and for your nightly fashion rundown of Steve Staker's shirts and what they mean. Steve's a very intentional dresser. Rebecca says that she's moving out of town after a tough divorce, says doing a lot of lasts, and today I realize that it is my last next. She says, you and your family have been a grounding part of my day, especially in this last year. Thank you for the levity and empathy. It mattered to me. Thank you so much for sending that note. All the best.